My name is Madison Blake, and for most of my life, I felt like the punchline to my parents' jokes. I grew up in Boise, Idaho, the only daughter of Richard and Denise Blake, two proud, traditional people who believe success only came in suits, law degrees, or medical scrubs. From the moment I was old enough to think for myself, I knew I wanted something different. Not law school, not medical school. I wanted to create. I wanted to be a graphic designer, the kind who breathes color into dull brands, who makes art that moves with meaning. But when I told them that at 17, sitting at our cluttered dinner table next to my two older brothers, both pre-med, my father nearly choked on his steak. Art? What the hell are you going to do with art, Maddie? He scoffed. Draw cartoons for cereal boxes? My mom didn't laugh outright, but her silence was worse. It was that pursed lip, judgmental quiet that meant she agreed, but wanted to pretend she was still supportive. They never took me seriously. At every family gathering, I was the joke. Oh, Maddie's still doing her little design thing. They'd chuckle. Or, hey, maybe one day she'll make a cartoon version of us. Followed by more laughter. I stopped trying to explain myself. Instead, I dove deep into my work. Internships, freelance gigs, sleepless nights building a portfolio while waitressing at a diner on weekends. I moved to Austin, Texas, and rented a shoebox apartment with peeling walls, but a window that let in golden sunlight each morning. It was mine. Years passed. I made a name for myself slowly. One client turned into five into 20. Then came my breakthrough. A pitch I submitted for a global rebranding campaign was picked up by a Fortune 500 company. My work went viral. Contracts came flooding in. I formed MB Studio. I hired a team. I bought a loft. And suddenly, the girl who doodled logos was designing brand identities for CEOs. Still, I didn't hear much from my parents. A birthday text here. A cold Christmas call there. That's how they were, silent when I succeeded, critical when I dared to hope. But then one rainy Thursday, everything shifted. I was reviewing concepts in the studio when my phone buzzed. Mom's cell. I blinked. She rarely called. I answered cautiously. Hey, Mom. Everything okay? A long pause. Then her voice, soft, uncertain. Hi, honey. Your father and I were just wondering if you're free to talk sometime soon. We've been thinking a lot about you. That sentence alone sent a chill down my spine. They'd never said that before. I sat upright, heart thudding. Sure. Is something wrong? She hesitated again. No, nothing like that. We're proud of you, Maddie. We've been seeing some of your work online. It's impressive. There it was. The first sign. I remember hanging up that call with a strange mix of emotions. Confusion, suspicion, even a tiny flicker of hope. Was it possible they were finally seeing me for who I was? That weekend, they asked to visit. They said they wanted to see my world. I spent hours tidying up the studio and apartment. I told myself they just wanted to reconnect. Maybe all those years of belittling me were a misunderstanding, a generational gap, some cultural divide I couldn't see as a teenager. But deep down, something didn't sit right. I kept remembering Dad's voice. You'll never make real money drawing pictures. When they arrived, I greeted them warmly. My mom hugged me tightly. My dad looked around, impressed but reserved. You did all this? He asked, gesturing at the studio wall covered in framed designs and brand campaigns. I nodded, watching his eyes flicker with something I couldn't name. Pride? Envy? We had dinner that night at a rooftop restaurant I booked. They asked questions, real ones. About my clients. My team. How much I made. That's when the unease crept in. They weren't just interested. They were probing. Dad cleared his throat between bites. We've been thinking about retirement lately. Things have been tight with your mom's medical expenses. It's a lot. Mom nodded, glancing at me with wide, imploring eyes. We never really planned for everything. We just assumed the boys would help. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I suddenly felt like I was back at that dinner table at 17, invisible again. Except this time, I wasn't the joke. I was the opportunity. We said goodnight after dinner, and I lay awake until 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling. They never apologized. Never once said they were wrong about me. But now that I had money, now that success was undeniable, they were back. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear what they'd say next. After that awkward dinner conversation, I tried to push everything to the back of my mind. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe I was reading too much into their sudden interest in my life, their curious tone when asking about my success, their fake laughter that didn't quite reach their eyes. But then the calls started. First, it was my mother. On a random Tuesday afternoon, she rang me for the first time in months. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, her voice unusually soft. "Just checking in. How are things? Business good?" She had never asked about my business before. In fact, she barely acknowledged it existed. I answered cautiously, "Yeah, things are going fine. Just working on a few new projects." "That's wonderful," she said too quickly. "We're so proud of you. Your father and I were just talking about how well you've done for yourself." That phrase made me pause. I could hear my father grunting in the background. They were together, coordinated, planning something. But what? I smiled politely through the phone. "Thanks, I appreciate that." But I didn't believe them. Not yet. Over the next week, the calls continued, both of them, alternating, sometimes even calling together, asking vague questions about my earnings, how much my apartment cost, whether I was thinking of investing in something big soon. My father mentioned his friend had a business opportunity, and my name came up in conversation. A sick feeling stirred in my stomach. These were the same people who mocked me when I first told them I was building a career in graphic design. They called it a hobby, said it wasn't real work, asked why I couldn't just get a proper job like your cousins. Back then, my home office was a tiny desk wedged into the corner of my cramped bedroom. I worked 16-hour days, survived on ramen noodles, and taught myself everything from scratch. I remember overhearing my father once telling my aunt on the phone, "He'll grow out of it. He has no idea how the real world works." And now they were acting like none of it ever happened. A few days later, I visited my parents' house for a routine lunch, something I did out of guilt more than desire. The house hadn't changed. The same dusty photo frames, the same creaky stairs, the same smell of lemon polish and denial. "Sit down, Beta," my father said, surprisingly cheerful. "Your mother's made your favorite biryani." I sat, trying not to overthink. My mother handed me a glass of water and patted my shoulder a little too tenderly. Something was definitely off. We ate in silence for a bit. Then came the moment I'd been dreading. "So, how much are you earning these days?" my father asked casually, as if he were asking about the weather. I looked up, fork halfway to my mouth. "Why?" "Oh, no reason," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Just curious. You seem to be doing well." My mother jumped in. "We saw your Instagram post. That trip to Dubai must have been expensive, huh?" "Not really," I said slowly. "It was a business trip. I had meetings there." They both nodded, but their eyes gleamed with something unspoken. My heart thudded. The tone had changed. This wasn't curiosity. It was calculation. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I stared at my reflection, trying to ground myself. This wasn't just awkward parenting. This was a shift. It was the way they spoke about money now. The way they lingered on the names of luxury brands I wore. The forced compliments. The half-hugs. The polite small talk that felt like bait. I started remembering things I had ignored before. Like the time my cousin mentioned my father had asked him about digital investment apps. Or when my mom casually asked me if I had any spare cash lying around, jokingly but with too much hope in her eyes. It was building up. A pattern. The following week confirmed my worst suspicions. I received an email, not from my parents, but from an old family friend I hadn't heard from in years. He wrote, "Hey, I heard from your parents that you've done really well for yourself. That's amazing, man. Your dad was telling me you might be interested in some community investment opportunities. Hit me up if you're looking to expand." I sat there staring at the screen, stunned. They were using my name to network. Without asking. Without permission. I was furious. But more than that, I felt violated. Exploited. The same parents who once told me I was wasting my time now parading me around like a trophy. They had spent years undermining me, cutting me off emotionally, making me feel like I was never enough. And now, suddenly, I was a walking opportunity.
No.
I couldn't let this continue. That evening, I called them. Why are you telling people I'm looking to invest in their projects? I asked sharply. There was a pause. Oh, Beta, my mom said, laughing nervously. We just thought you'd be open to helping out some old friends. Giving back to the community. Did I say I wanted to? Did you even ask me? My father took over. Don't be dramatic. We're just trying to help you make connections. I could feel my blood boil.
No.
You're trying to use me. After all these years of belittling me, now you suddenly want a piece of the success you never believed in. Silence. Then my mother, quietly, that's not fair. I hung up. The next few days were tense. No calls. No texts. Just silence. But I wasn't at peace. My mind raced every night, memories swirling, emotions clashing. Part of me still wanted their approval. Another part wanted them to suffer in their regret. But mostly, I just wanted them to stop pretending they had supported me. They hadn't. They'd laughed at my dreams, mocked my choices, and distanced themselves when I struggled. And now that I had built something of my own, they wanted to rewrite the story. They wanted in. A few days later, I got a message from my mother. We're proud of you, sweetheart. We just want to be part of your life again. Part of my life?
No.
They didn't want to be part of my life. They wanted to be part of my lifestyle. And that realization broke something in me. I remember the exact moment it all shifted. It wasn't some grand revelation or explosive confrontation. It was quiet, subtle, but it tore through everything I thought I understood about my family. It was a Sunday afternoon. I had just wrapped up a virtual keynote for a major tech summit, my voice still buzzing in my ears from the applause. As I closed my laptop, a notification popped up, a message from Mom. Call us when you're free. It's urgent. Those 5 words. It wasn't like them to say something was urgent unless someone was in the hospital. I froze, a cold knot forming in my stomach. I called immediately. My father answered on the first ring, his voice oddly cheerful. Too cheerful. Hey, kiddo. Long time no talk. Heard about your big speech. Big-time CEO now, huh? His laugh echoed with forced warmth. I replied with caution.
Yeah, it went well.
Everything okay? He hesitated. We're proud of you, he said, then cleared his throat. Listen, your mom and I were wondering if we could come by. Just a quick visit. We have some things to discuss. My pulse quickened. They hadn't been to my apartment in over 2 years. The last time they visited, Mom couldn't hide her judgmental glances at the minimalist decor, and Dad had mocked my choice of artwork. And now they wanted to come over? I agreed, out of a mixture of curiosity and dread. They arrived an hour later. My mom brought a store-bought cake, one I knew she'd usually scoff at, and my dad looked freshly shaved and uncomfortable in business casual clothes. They stepped in, eyes scanning the apartment. Dad let out a whistle.
Wow.
You really made something of yourself. Mom smiled awkwardly. We always knew you would. We just didn't know how to support it at the time. I narrowed my eyes, sensing something deeper. This wasn't an apology. This was a prelude. We sat at the dining table. They fidgeted like school kids about to ask the principal for leniency. Finally, my mom spoke. We need your help. Financially. There it was. We're in a bit of a rough patch, she continued. The house needs repairs. Your father's pension has been delayed. And we thought, well, you're doing really well now. She tried to smile. You could loan us some money, Dad added. Just for a few months. Nothing huge. Maybe 25,000. I blinked. 25,000? The room spun for a moment. Not because I didn't have it, but because these were the same people who'd laughed at me for pursuing graphic design, who told me I was wasting my life when I turned down the accounting firm they tried to force me into. The same people who refused to attend my first gallery exhibit and didn't even acknowledge my startup launch. You think I owe you that? I said slowly. Dad raised his eyebrows. You're our child. Family helps family. That word, family, hit like a slap. I had begged them for emotional support for years. All I got in return were lectures and eye rolls. I begged you to believe in me, I said, voice shaking. And you told me my career was a joke, that I'd end up broke and crawling back. But I didn't crawl. I ran. And now that I've made it, suddenly you remember I exist? Mom's eyes welled up. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Silence. I stood, pacing the room. I needed to breathe. The betrayal didn't come from their request. It came from the hypocrisy behind it. I remember when I launched my online brand, and you said it was a phase. I remember when you told Aunt Linda I was playing CEO. I remember Christmas, when you bought gifts for everyone but me, because I had no real job. You told me I embarrassed you. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't let them fall. And now you want me to act like none of that happened? Just hand over money, because we share blood? Dad looked away. We were wrong. Yeah, I said. You were. It wasn't about the money. I could have handed them the entire amount without blinking. It was the principle, the years of emotional debt that no dollar amount could erase. They stayed quiet. I let the silence speak for them. Then, as I sat back down, Mom placed a hand on mine. We're sorry. Her voice cracked. We didn't know how to support someone like you. You were always different. You saw things we didn't. Took risks we couldn't understand. And we didn't know how to love that version of you. So we tried to change you. But we were wrong. Something shifted in me then, not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. Maybe even a touch of understanding. They were products of their own limitations. But that didn't mean I had to bear the cost of their regrets. I'll think about it, I said finally. But not today. You need to know what it cost me to get here. Mom nodded. Dad, too proud to admit defeat, simply looked at the cake box. We sat in that uneasy quiet for a long while. The air between us was thick, years of missteps and misunderstandings wrapped into a single request. A single moment. They eventually left, and as the door clicked shut, I stood alone in the center of my apartment. It had never felt this big, or this empty, but also never this powerful. That night, I opened an old notebook where I had scribbled my goals during the darkest days of my journey. The days they mocked me, the nights I cried alone, wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. On the last page, in shaky handwriting, I had written, "Someday, they'll ask for my help." I never thought that day would come, and now that it had, I wasn't sure whether it was justice or just the saddest full circle. They arrived at my new apartment dressed like strangers trying to fit into my world. My father wore a blazer that looked like it hadn't seen daylight in a decade, and my mother's heels clicked uncomfortably against the polished marble floors. I could tell they rehearsed whatever speech they were about to give, smiling too wide, complimenting things they never would have noticed before. Wow, my mother said, glancing around. This is impressive. That word, impressive, came out like she bit her tongue halfway through saying it. It didn't sound like praise. It sounded like surrender. I offered them tea, but none of us touched it. The silence between us stretched tight like a rubber band. One word, one breath, and it would snap. Then came the moment. We were thinking, my dad started, clearing his throat. With the business doing so well for you now, maybe it's time we all got back to being a family. You know, support each other. Support. That was rich. I laughed. Not politely. Not softly. I laughed like a man who'd finally heard the punchline to the cruel joke life had been telling for years. You want support now? I asked. Is that what you call it? Their faces stiffened. My mother looked down at her tea, suddenly very interested in the cup she had no intention of drinking from. All those years you mocked me for chasing music, remember? You told everyone at church that I was too lazy for real work. You said I was embarrassing the family. You pulled your financial support, and Dad called me a bum. Now you want a piece of this success? My voice rose, not in volume, but in weight. Each word landed like a stone. My dad bristled. We were just trying to push you toward something secure. Something realistic. No, you were trying to mold me into someone safe for you. Someone predictable. You hated that I had passion because you had none. You called it rebellion. You called it a phase. You even told Aunt Layla I'd be homeless within 5 years. My mother finally spoke, softly. But you're not homeless. And you're not proud, I snapped. You're desperate. The room fell into a heavy silence. I stood up, unable to sit still anymore. I walked to the window, looking down at the city that once mocked me too. But I didn't escape this life by chance. I fought for it. I bled for it. I starved for it. They didn't build this, I did. I turned back to face them. When I was working double shifts to pay studio rent, where were you? When I got my first big break, you didn't even call. When Forbes ran my interview, you told your friends it was fake news. My dad's voice dropped, almost to a whisper. We were wrong. There it was. 3 little words I waited a lifetime to hear. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt hollow. Because an apology after the fact doesn't erase years of discouragement. It doesn't replace birthdays spent alone or dinner skipped because I couldn't afford both food and sheet music. I didn't need them to beg. I needed them to believe, then. My mother's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. We're not here just for money, she said. We miss you. We want to be part of your life again. I studied her face. Was it guilt? Or just manipulation dressed in the skin of regret? Do you even know the name of my latest album? I asked. She blinked, caught off guard. Of course we do. It's the one with the blue cover. I nodded slowly. It's called Orphaned While Living. I wrote it about you. Her mouth fell open, but no sound came. I sat back down, calm now. Look, I'm not here to punish you. I made peace with your absence a long time ago. But don't come knocking now because I've turned pain into profit. Don't expect access to the castle when you laughed while I built it brick by brick in the rain. My father leaned forward. So, you're just going to turn your back on us? No, I replied. I'm just not handing over the pen and letting you rewrite history. Another silence. But this one was different. They realized they didn't hold the power anymore. And that realization shook them. I softened slightly. I'm not cruel. I'll help you with what you need, groceries, bills, whatever. But this idea of family bonding after years of mockery? That ship sailed when you told me I was wasting my life. They stood up. My dad gave a curt nod. My mother gave a half-hearted hug that landed like a ghost. As they walked to the door, I said one last thing. Quietly but clearly. You didn't believe in me when I had nothing. Don't pretend you do now that I have everything. They left, and I finally exhaled. Not out of anger, but release. I wasn't the failure they predicted. I was the future they never saw coming, and the past they could no longer control. I sat alone in my high-rise apartment, the city lights blinking like judgmental eyes outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. My phone buzzed again, another message from Mom. Just a small loan, sweetheart. We supported you for years. It's only fair. Fair. That word looped in my mind like a cruel joke. I remembered sitting at the family dinner table years ago, trying to explain what I wanted to do, launch my own digital startup. Dad had laughed so hard, he nearly choked on his wine. You? A CEO? Come on, be serious. Mom had patted my hand with that half smile, half smirk, and said I'd grow out of this silly phase. But I didn't. Now, the same people who told me I'd never make it were trying to spin a new narrative. We always knew you'd be someone, Mom had written in another message last week. We're so proud of you. Funny. They were only proud now that the money was undeniable. After I turned down their request the first time, Dad called me himself. The voice that used to thunder insults now sounded desperate, paper-thin. He tried a different tactic, guilt. Do you think we had it easy raising you? He asked. You owe us, son. I owe you, I repeated slowly, stunned. All those nights we fed you, clothed you. We gave you a roof, education. And you're telling me you can't spare a dime for your old man? That's when I realized it. This wasn't about love or family or pride. This was about survival for them and power for me. They didn't see me as a success. They saw me as a bank. I hung up without replying. But silence didn't end it. It never does. I couldn't sleep that night. Their words clawed through my chest, unearthing old, buried wounds. I thought I had healed. I thought I had moved on. But deep inside, there was still that child. The one who came home excited with a drawing and got told it was a waste of time. The teenager whose parents skipped their graduation because real jobs don't come from art degrees. The adult who launched a business from a cramped studio, living off ramen and rejection, never hearing a single word of encouragement. I wasn't angry, I was hollow. I felt cheated. They hadn't just doubted me, they had never believed in me. Not even once. Now that I'd built something massive, something real, they wanted to pretend they'd always supported me. But there was no pride in their eyes. Only greed. I started to pull away, not just from them, but from everyone.
Friends. Colleagues.
Even my assistant noticed. "You okay?" she asked once, dropping off reports. "You've been quiet." I nodded, but didn't answer. What could I say? That I was the proof everyone dreams of becoming, and I felt emptier than ever? A month passed. I thought the storm had passed too. Then one evening, a courier arrived at my door with a thick envelope. I tore it open. Inside, legal paperwork. They were threatening to sue me. My own parents. The documents claimed parental investment. They wanted a percentage of my business earnings, citing years of emotional support and developmental resources. I almost laughed. Almost. But I didn't. Instead, I stared out at the skyline again. The same skyline I used to dream beneath as a broke, humiliated kid. Every light represented someone who doubted me, ignored me, or tried to pull me back down. I clenched the edge of the envelope until my fingers turned white. They hadn't just crossed a line. They'd set it on fire. I turned away from the window, stepped into my office, and unlocked the drawer where I kept the real file, my legal counterclaim. If they wanted a piece of me now, I whispered, they were about to learn just how expensive betrayal really is.